Hi, everyone. In this video, we're going over the 7 beta reading, or at least the first paragraph of it in Athenaze. Where are we? We're in the Cyclops Polyphemus's cave, and things are about to get interesting. So first the Greek, and then we'll read through in English. Dioligo de psophon megiston akusin, kai eserketai gigas poberos. Heiskar ophthalmos en mesoto metopo enestin. Hotun Odysseus kai hoi hetairoi mala pobuntai kai eston tu anthru mukon peugusin. Hode gigas proton mento probata kai tas aigas estonatron eselaune, epede hanta endon esten, leton megiston aire, kai esten tu anthru esodon bale. En tauta de proton men tas aigas amelge, epeta de pur cae, huto de ton teodicea, cae tus etairos hora, cae oxenoi boa, tiles este, cae pothen blete. That was a voice you did not need to hear. I apologize. I don't know what came over me. Let's tackle the Greek now. Dioligu, we've seen this through a number of times now, in a little bit through a small space of time. So chronos is kind of the idea here, but dia, we have an elision here of an alpha. So if we were to write this out fully, delta iota alpha, but simply dioligu, get used to that. That should be like a sight phrase for you. A little while later, de, just resumptive, and a little while later. Psophon, that's new vocabulary, but it's glossed. Noise. We can tell presumably, although we're getting into some forms that look like this in other cases, Omicron knew if this is a second declension noun, as it is indeed, this is likely an accusative form. Megiston helps confirm that. And then we have akuusin, nice third person plural indicative there. And we know that you hear from somebody in the genitive, but you hear sounds in the accusative. So to translate that, and in a little while, they, and this is going to be Odysseus and his companions, hear a great noise. And kai es erkatai, erkatai, one of these deponent verbs we've gotten to know, enter, go, or sorry, go, move. Es erkatai is enter. Gigas poberos. So poberos, we've seen this. This is, cognate with phobeo or phobeomai, the verb that we're working with here, means fearsome. And then gigas, you might think that's an adjective, but they have a form for that. This is in fact the noun, a terrifying giant, nicely glossed there. And we can tell here this is going to be nominative because we have a nominative second declension noun in phoberos. Gigas is going to be one of these, not just a new stem, third declension, but a new tau stem, third declension. We'll get to that in a little bit, but this is a third declension nominative, and we should be getting used to this now in chapter 7. So what does this all mean? After a little while, they, i.e. Odysseus and companions, hear a great noise, and a fearsome giant enters. And where are they? They're in the cave. That's where they're entering. Note that we have no definite article here. This giant is unknown to Odysseus and his crew, possibly unknown to a reader, but I think most of us, if we know the Odyssey at all, know this story. So this is the giant Polyphemus. He is a Cyclops, but I'm spoiling the story. Let's just get on with it. Why is he fearsome? That's what this gar phrase, this postpositive gar, second in kind of sequence, often second word, but sometimes it can be third, but it's never going to be the first word in the next sentence, is referring to why is he fearsome? Because he has hes, one ophthalmos, one eye. In meso, we would say the middle, but Greek is fine just saying in middle. In middle, to or for or within the metopes, right, the middle of his forehead. So this is, as we see here, the middle of his forehead. Anestin, it's the N here that is allowing us to work both with meso and to metopo, all in the dative. There is one single eye, and where is it? In the middle of the forehead. That's what this expression means. So just run with that for now. We can get into some of the niceties of why there's a preposition here and what meso does with respect to nouns in a future lesson. Let's get going. Ha to, and note here we have normally proclitic definite article, masculine nominative singular ha, get an accent because it's followed by the enclitic t. So if we see this, we should be expecting, as prose readers, a chi coming down. So even as we're reading this, we don't know what's coming, but we can say, both then, Odysseus and hoi hetairoi, the companions, but in English, it might be more natural to say his companions. Mala pobuntai. Look at this ending. This is nice medio passive or middle passive, however we want to call it, verb form. We don't know what the passive means here, but we know phobeo doesn't mean to terrify something else, but to scare yourself, become scared. So that's what we have here. Odysseus then and his companions are very afraid. That's the mala as the adverb in the position we would expect immediately before the verb modifying it. Kaeston to anthru mukon. Oh, this is the nested noun phrases that we love to see in Greek. Ace as a preposition is going to take the accusative. That's why we have ton here, and that's unambiguously masculine. So we know we're going to have a masculine noun in the accusative closing this, but immediately after this accusative definite article, we get a genitive singular definite article. It's second declension, clearly. We can't tell if it's masculine or neuter, but it's working with antron, which happens to be a neuter noun. But you couldn't really tell that just from the form here. All that we can see is second declension, but clearly these two work together, and it's the mucon, and we get that new definition down here, the corner, and then here we have within that of the cave. So literally, this is into the of the cave corner. And we can kind of make sense of that in English, the of the cave corner, but it wouldn't be good expression. It wouldn't be natural sounding English. But look at how that's working in Greek. Preposition here, taking an accusative phrase, ton through mucon. And then that ton mucon, we're given extra attributive information about it, slotting in a genitive phrase right before it. So this is all one noun phrase, ton through mucon, but nested within it is another dependent genitive noun phrase, to antru. All right, lovely. Peugusin. Now we get into another third person plural verb. It's going to be maintaining the same subject as phobuntai, and that is indeed our explicit subject of the sentence, Odysseus and his companions. So from the top of this sentence, then both Odysseus and his companions are very afraid, and into the corner of the cave they flee. Again, we would put the they flee at the beginning of the English predicate, and they flee into the beginning of into the corner of the cave. You got it. Horigigas. All right, and the Gigas, the giant that we're talking about, we're not calling him a cyclops yet. Note that the de here is just telling us the story is moving on, but it allows us to do a nice subject change following the ha. So we have been talking about Odysseus, but now it's clear that the giant is going to be our grammatical subject. We're going to be looking for third person singular verbs coming down the line. Proton, adverbial, first things first. Men, okay, if we know there's a men, there's going to be a de coming down the line at some point. So we'll see where that appears. But we're going to now have ta probata. That is neuter plural. Is it accusative? Is it nominative? Is it vocative? The form doesn't tell us, but context is going to rule out the vocative. And the fact that we have no connector, no chi or something with the gigas means this is almost certainly going to be accusative, but we'll keep reading to make sure. Chi, and, all right, so that's going to connect to grammatical equals. And here we get the clincher, tais aegas, unambiguously third declension, accusative plural. And then here we can tell that they are she goats. It's not tous aegas, but tas aegas. No billy goats involved. So these probata, as we will learn, there's one male and the rest are female sheep, ewes. All right, so those sheep, gender neutral, at least as we're presenting it, grammatically neuter, and the she goats into the cave, ace alaune. Again, our core vocabulary here is alaune, he, she, it drives. Ace drives into, and then this works somewhat redundantly in English with the prepositional phrase into the cave. Drives into the cave, the sheep and the goats. So that's what the giant does first, on the one hand. But then, on the other hand, when all inside estin. This is frustrating because this is a third person singular verb, but look at its subject, panta. That is neuter, clearly, could be accusative, but here it's going to have to step into the nominative place as the third person subject. But no, that's plural. That's neuter plural in its morphology. But neuter nouns in the subject position always take singular conjugated verbs. So we're going to get estin here, not asin, even though this is all plural. So, and when they are all inside. Now, why is it being panta here? We could imagine pantes or even pasai if they were all feminine. Those would be completely fine nominative things. But we have probata here, which were neuter. And there's a sense that even if we have these now she-goats into the mix, they have a grammatical gender that's non-neuter. All of these are things. Their possessions, their chattel in the mind of maybe the speaker, maybe in the mind of the Cyclops as well. We can work with the neuter. So when everything is inside, lithon megiston, a stone, again, no definite article, so this is indefinite, a stone, but we learn it's a big one, a very big one, an exceedingly large stone. He lifts, and this is going back to our grammatical subject all the way back there, gigas. This epe clause made panta the subject, but that was temporary. That was a temporal clause. We're now getting back to our grammatical subject of the main sentence. He lifts a giant stone, a very large stone, and and then again, what we had up here, this was the corner of the cave. This is the asodos of the cave. Horos, as we know, feminine, but second declension, that's what's working with this feminine article. So even if you take a noun and add a prefix, it's the end of the noun that's going to really determine the gender of that noun in 99% of situations in Greek. So if you know horos is feminine, you also know that ace horos is going to be feminine as well. So into the entrance of the cave, the giant lifts a very large stone. All right, good. Let's keep going. Entauta, then, thereupon, de, proton. All of these things are hard to translate in English up front. De is just kind of emphasizing that this really happened. We should be paying attention. Then indeed, first, on the one hand, tas aigas amelge. Again, subject is the gigas, the Cyclops, Polyphemus. Amelge, to milk. These things are cognate, so it's not accidental that this kind of looks like milk in English, but he's milking the she-goats. Okay, that's what he's doing first. And then lights kae, a fire. Note that this ka is strong. It's a long alpha. It doesn't contract with the ending here. And pure is going to be a neuter third declension noun. So we haven't learned this form yet. We'll get to the row stem things eventually. I guess we do have some liquid stems coming up in this section, but that's immaterial. The fact that this is neuter means it's the same form in the accusative as the nominative. It doesn't get an alpha here. This is going to be the accusative object of the fire, of the lighting verb, of which the subject is the gigas. So that was a big mouthful. Let's start it from the top. Then, truly, first, on the one hand, again, that's a lot for English. We would want to split that up somehow, but for a literal translation, this is fine. He milks the she-goats, and then he lights a fire. In this way, thusly, and this is saying because the fire got lit, indeed. Again, this is kind of just, I wish we could get into proper discourse analysis here, but this is good storytelling. These indeeds, these are, you can imagine the storyteller opening up his mouth, getting more into the story. And I guess this is Philip who's giving all of this narration to his sister. Ton Odysseia, so on the one hand, or both Odysseus and his companions, horakai. Remember that this is an alpha contract verb, so it's alpha plus epsilon iota, and that's what's getting us this contracted form where the persistent iota goes into a subscript, at least in this text, but the alpha effectively subsumes the epsilon. But because it did get the accent originally when this was an uncontracted form, we see that vestige in the circumflex over the alpha here. So he sees, and then we get as often in Greek, even with things that aren't enclitic like facey or facin, we'll start the quote and then we'll have the kind of word of utterance, put just as soon as it can before this rest of the sentence continues. So, oh, guests, strangers, foreigners, xenos has really rich resonances in Greek culture broadly and as a thematic just through line in the Odyssey. We'll have to save that for some other time. No thematics here, only grammar. So Oh, strangers, let's say, he shouts, who are you? This is interrogative tis t, and we'll come back to that, but we can tell because it has an accent, and it's an acute accent. Even if this were monosyllabic and this were the final thing, t, tis always remains acute. It's interrogative, it's tonal. As in English, we raise the tone of the end of our sentences to communicate a question, and Greek does similar things, always making their interrogative words acutely accented. So, who are you? And from whence? I think we have this new vocab up here. Nobody uses whence, but this is works well with a genitive in Greek to say from where. But here we don't actually get, if we needed, we could say, from what island did you sail or something? We put that in the genitive, but here we can just say pothen. It's an interrogative adverb. From where are you all sailing? Pleuete. So that's a tricky verb because there's a hidden digamma in there, but don't worry about that. The thing to really stick to right here is this is one of our new stem third declension nouns, and this is the interrogative one. This is an interrogative pronoun, properly speaking. Who are you, and from where are you sailing? That's it. All right, there's more of the story, but I think this was good to get everything in. We talked about she-goats, we talked about Odysseus, we talked about Xenia, or the kind of concept of guest friends. We'll get to more as we go on. This is enough for now, more than enough for now. Thanks for bearing with me. Till next time.